Good evening, and welcome to Lit Youngstown's Uplifting Voices reading series. My name is Karen Schubert, and I am the director of Lit Youngstown, and I'm thrilled to be hosting four readers for whom I have so much admiration. I know this will be an incredible reading, and we'll follow with a brief conversation. Tonight's readers are all wildly accomplished, and I'll introduce them in alphabetical order. Julia Kolchinsky is the author of four poetry collections: The Many Names for Mother, Don't Touch the Bones, 40 Weeks, and Parallax. Her nonfiction has appeared in Brevity, Shenandoah, and Michigan Quarterly Review. She is assistant professor of English creative writing at Denison University. Welcome, Julia.
Hi, everybody. What a delight to go through it getting dark at 5 p.m. and it getting really cold and bring some light and some warmth. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from my new book, Parallax, and then maybe go back to my first collection and read a couple poems from Many Names for Mother. So Parallax is a collection very much about raising my neurospicy child amid grappling with the war in my birthplace, Ukraine. Um, and so that's all you need to know. I do not mention the war to my 6-year-old son, but somehow his body knows. My face in his hands before bed, he asks, "If I cut you in half, will you be even?" I am silent. Expecting mothers in Mariupol are cut by invisible hands, children cut off from water, because you have 2 eyes, plus 2 ears, plus 2 cheeks, plus so much hair, plus your mouth can have 2 halves, so you would be even, right? He wants simple math, breath that outlasts violence. You divided by 2 equals 2 even yous. He isn't asking anymore. He is making me monument. You would still be if I cut you in half. Small hands demand a splitting. If you cut me in half, I tell him, I'd be dead. So we're getting to the holiday season, and I lived in Arkansas before moving to the lovely state of Ohio. And I wrote this poem in response to buying a Christmas tree with my mother-in-law, amid the war in Ukraine, and amid also being Jewish and raising my children, to know about their Jewishness. The Ukrainian flag stares through the balsam fir from Larry's farms. "Just take it," he said. I doubted generosity. "Are you sure?" I was still $30 short. I've learned nothing is free in this country. His white mustache curled to a smile. I'm Larry, and this is the South, and these are my trees. How easy to claim what soil gives, to own trees and bodies, to give them away to strangers so my children can hang shatterproof ornaments and ask for more light, while in Ukraine the bulbs won't spark and heat won't radiate. The soil will stay snow-covered and theirs, and in my house strings and strings of electric rainbow dazzle, trail the evergreen, and walls, and wind my children's small limbs. Here, it's barely cold enough to light a fire, but we can and do. With oak and crabapple, we home its added glow, so everything smells of invited smoke and pine, not invaded smoking sky, where the windows flicker with candlelight and shellings. And tomorrow, I will bake gingerbread and fry latkes and light candles forbidden in my Soviet childhood. Tomorrow, I will pray to a God I don't believe in for more miracle. Tomorrow, I will still have been born from darkness and wick. And tonight, when I lift my daughter to place the silver star on the highest branch, and my American mother-in-law takes a photo, the only light will be the yellow-blue horizon of the flag frozen in the window behind us. And I still have this same flag hanging on my walls now in Ohio. And it's quite freezing, so it's fitting. This next poem, the book has many poems called Why Write Another Poem About the Moon? Because we're all, as writers, obsessed with the moon. And if you haven't written a poem about the moon, are you really even a writer? So this is one of the many Why Write Another Poem About the Moon poems. Why write another poem about the moon when my son is surrounded by the severed heads of Barbies I spent a decade loving, but haven't touched for 3 of his lifetimes? How long after he ran his fingertips so gently across their hair did he tear the plastic skulls from their torso trunks and leave them naked like birch branches from my childhood, stripped of bark by summer thunderstorm, and strewn so far who knows what tree they once belonged to? The doll I carried across the Atlantic is hit the worst, her pelvis cracked in half and head missing altogether. Its mess of dirty curl just like his own, and eyes too much like mine. Moons, he says. They look like hairy moons. My son, their son, and I am terrified for every woman, every moon he longs to touch. So I've been writing a poem on every anniversary of the war, and I thought I would write one year later and that would be it, and 2 years later and that would be it, and 3 years later and that would be it. And now in February, we're approaching 4 years of the full-scale invasion. So this is 1 year later, and it's a villanelle for our formal lovers in the room, which is a form with 2 refrains that repeat. And I find when you're writing about something quite unfathomable and ungraspable, that form can help give a box, a container, to write something that is really challenging and, resists containment. 1 year later, it's easy to look away from war when your wallet's empty and the sink is full, when the land and people aren't yours, when your children scream for more of you, when your body's pulled. It's easy to look away from war. The soil across the water to earth's core brims blood, but look, the sunflowers still bloom when the land and people aren't yours. So you focus on the daily chores, dig out a trench of laundry, linens, wools. It's easy to look away from war with a dog barking mailman at the door. Your children speak a stranger's tongue at school. The land and people aren't yours. How does a house become a shore no news can reach? Are we that cruel? Or is it just that easy to look away from war when the land and people aren't yours? So I'm gonna go back to my first book, The Many Names for Mother, which is very much about my immigration and having my son. Why I never wore my mother's pearls. Because she wore cherries in her ears instead of gold or silver. Because hers were heavier than fruit. Because they made me want milk we didn't have. Because of want. because I couldn't fit the word chug in my mouth, and all that white reminded me too much of teeth, because we threw teeth behind the stove so new ones would grow in, because sometimes they didn't, because change is the only certain beauty, and strung up side by side, things cease to be as beautiful, because holding failed across continents, and my mother's jewelry box stayed empty, because leaving meant she could only take one necklace, because the pearls, like teeth, were left behind. And I'm going to close with, a poem that I hope is maybe slightly uplifting. Let's try to be uplifting. And it's about, bringing a cassette tape of Michael Jackson from Ukraine to the United States. And maybe one other thing to note is that for those who don't know, Keiko is the name of the orca whale in Free Willy. Anyone else grew up watching Free Willy? It was an important movie in my childhood that we rented every Friday for 99 cents from Tower Records. So, listening to Michael Jackson in a closet and on the kitchen floor, and as a child in our first apartment, several stops from DC, and on the way to the White House, and in a bedroom of 7 refugees, and as a daughter who brought American music from Ukraine back to America, and as a mother, windows down, blaring Billie Jean through Ringgold Street in South Philadelphia, and in the bath, drowning deflated rubber ducks, and when the bubbles have left cloudy water, and my son demands, Alexa, play Thriller. And Alexa, volume 10. And Alexa, play it louder. And play in English, Alexa. And does he really turn into a Volk, meaning wolf? And Mama, be a zombie. And what's zombie in Russian? And Mama, play zombie tag. And Mama, tansui, tansui, dance, живи, live, and live. There's too much I cannot translate, but my son can recognize Michael's voice anywhere, and ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3. And that's the Jackson 5, my American-born ex-husband corrects. And won't you please let me back in your heart? And I grew up with Michael's voice pushing the captive orca whale back over a stone barricade, and he pushed me somewhere too. So even as kids teased me for loving Free Willy and sour cream and Michael and called me buffalo legs and smells of garlic and voted me most likely to be uncovered as an alien and asked if I was born to like red and hammers, and how we smuggled our gold, and how we hid our horns, and how we survived. And I pressed play and play and play and play on the cassette tape until it unspooled. And it don't matter. And Keiko never could have cleared that height without carry me like I'm a brother, love me like a mother, and will you be there? And my son, hear my song unspooling too. Your body can music and robot, can moonwalk and break free of any man-made or imagined walls. And listen to your feet, my love. They sing across so many languages. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. An internationally renowned Latina author from Mexico City, Violeta Orozco is a bilingual performer, fiction writer, essayist, and poet, author of the Broken Woman Diaries, winner of the Rising Stars Award at the International Latino Book Award, and Stillness in the Land of Speed, winner of the New Voices Poetry Award. Welcome, Violeta.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for inviting me. And it was great to listen to Julia. I'm gonna read some poems from my new poetry book that are curated to this reading because I've been I had to return recently to Mexico to take care of my father, because he's been ill now for a while, and the world of the immigrant when they return is hard to describe. Poetry is one of the tools that helps us name the unnameable, and sometimes the ways in which we don't find ourselves fully at home even when we return to what was supposed to be the homeland. So this book is kind of dedicated to diasporic thinking. I think it's a way of thought. It's not just poetry, right? We say, oh, it's poetry. It's just words, but it is a way of thinking. It is an epistemology. It is a view we develop from beyond. I call it the view from beyond because we're always beyond nation, beyond language, right? Between borders, between songs, between lullabies. We're always torn, and at the same time, we're more integrated than those who have never left their country and don't know what it is to lose it twice. Once when you left, and once when you're back and you realize everything's changed and you don't know what's up anymore. So this book is called Atlas of an Ancient World because it's trying to trace the cartographies of the land in the Americas before this whole thing we called colonization. What were the cartographies of the ancients before America or the Americas was called such by an European immigrant, Americo Vespuccio? What were our own world maps, our own world views, our own gods, the things that we worshipped? It was published last year by Black Lawrence Press. So if you like the book, you can purchase it at blacklawrencepress.com. And here goes 3 poems from Atlas of an Ancient World. The first one is called The Cobbler, El Zapatero. The cobbler that put soles in these boots is dead. A whole age has gone by after he left. They don't fix shoes in my old neighborhood anymore. I don't recognize half the stores in this strip once I returned. They sprouted in the pandemic like mushrooms after a storm. This used to be my street 20 years ago. The cycle is complete. I return after nothing here knows where I came from. And this one is called La Parecida, which in Spanish means the apparition or the appeared. It is a noun as well as it can be made into a verb, of course. But it can also mean a ghost, because an apparition, is a ghost. So, La Parecida. Many of us poets deal with the hauntings of diaspora, right? The things we left behind become ghosts in our mind, in our memories, and our hearts, and they haunt us till the end of time. The neighbor told us she came to say goodbye 25 years later. She knocked on the same door, imagining someone should be living there still. But no one answered. Not even a dog rushed out to meet her like before. She might have come 6 months ago when he was still alive and barking at every neighbor on the block. What was she thinking? Coming back like that into our lives when we'd already lived for other cities. My brother perched high upon a steeple in Oaxaca, restoring a 300-year-old dome. His magic hands returning Baroque churches to their original aspect. While I gasped in awe at El Milagro the miracle. Mi tía estaba viva. My aunt was alive. She was last seen on November 1st, Día de los Muertos, Niños, claiming she'd come back. La desaparecida finalmente aparecida. The disappeared finally appeared. Strangest thing is my dad didn't see her. He left the house to get milk and eggs. Really. Milk and eggs, for Christ's sake. Right at the same moment she walked into her old haunts. She never came back. Never left a phone number, an address, any sign or sound. She left as she had come, no warning or farewell. I wonder what she had come to tell us, even as I write from another country, my ear pressed to the ground to catch the slightest beat of her footsteps upon my father's lawn. And then I'm going to read sort of like a nostalgic poem of the things I missed in Mexico City when I wasn't here. Also, to end on a brighter note. It's called Ode to the Industrial Peripheries of Mexico City. And I gladly extend to all the peripheries, industrial peripheries of the world. I never questioned the origin of cats. I thought they sprang up like bacteria in a dying body, like the myriads of factories erupting in every corner of Cuitlahuac, former Aztec stronghold where armies of ants once swarmed into the city. Train lines connected Azcapotzalco, Utlanepantla's peripheries of dust. This is how I was born, in this urban borderland where flower markets and cornfields bloomed into refineries and warehouses almost overnight. Smells from the slaughterhouse on my grandmother's block would drift to our houses, to our noses, on hot summer days. There squeals a strident melody in the bustling morning. I swear there were more cats than people in that house. Strays, huh? Stray cats, not your domestic white, fluffy cats. My uncle had to buy a rifle just to get rid of one of their 9 lives for 9 years until we took down that cat nest inside a pile of old rotten bricks with a bulldozer. Industrial soot and grime covered the food we ate at the open-air market, El Mercadito, where fried fish communed with salsa Valentina every Saturday. I've never tasted tacos half as good as those. The smoky flavor of the street mingled with motorbike roars. See, I told you. And cars' exhaust pipes sputtering warm breath into my face. My lungs grew up in smoke instead of air. We all squinted through a thick gray film to see the Mexican mountains of Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl shrouded by a veil of smog. Before I came to this Midwestern woodland, I didn't realize how much I missed the smell of fossil fuels burning like a bonfire in the middle of the night. Thank you.
Oh, delightful, Violeta. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me, Karen.
My great pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. Maria Espicone is a Korean American adoptee with 3 chapbooks: Anti-Asian Bias, Adoptee Song, published by Game Over Books, and This Tenuous Atmosphere, published by Conium. She received prizes from Salamander and Cream City Review, and grants from Kenyon Review, Juniper, Hambridge, SCAC, South Arts, and elsewhere. Welcome, Maria.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I think because it's thematic for tonight, I'm going to be reading some poems from Adoptee Song, which is my chapbook that came out this July. So my first poem is called To Fievel from An American Tale. You are a child like me, young and trusting, gazing up at moon and stars in longing for family, dream praying to the guardian angel. We space-worn immigrants carry American tales, journeys of ecstasy, terror, reeling and fledgling nightmares. I fear shadowy warriors with spears assaulting my bed, my father's skull cracking in half, me with only a band-aid to press back against the rip. A cast of stuffed animals and imaginary friends witness my sleepless quietude, my doubt that family awaits me or has forgotten me. Unlike you, I've never found my mother's hug again. I've been in this bedroom waiting, forever aware she passed me on from her womb, alternate future, portending, dislocating me from her body like a fallen star. Knowing my tale began with the crossing from Seoul to Boston, she passed on me, my only wish as I behold the angel's silver visage, for her to be thinking of me, loving me tonight. Time moves on, but in this sacred limbo, part of me will always linger. This quiet belief, if I'm perfect enough, if I endure, I might make it home. Underneath the stars, dawn birds are ramping up their singing. Somewhere out there, I will find the person whose love committed me here. I will be by the side of the angel, the guardian, for whom now, tears welling up in an old child's eyes, I have to believe is asleep underneath the same big sky. This poem is called History of Adoption in Korea, and Korea has been struck through, and it's now History of Adoption in Maria. In South Korea, adoption was initially introduced to find families to look after war orphans and mixed-race children, and has gone through a series of changes over the past 50 years. The nation's economic development and improved quality of life have led to a rise in domestic adoption, enhancing the public perception of adoption. Recently, the South Korean government designated the National Adoption Day. And that's a quote from the Korean Adoption Services website. 당신은 한국인이 아닙니다. At 4 months old, I relinquished my rights as a Korean citizen. I became a doorway without country, swinging open and shut. 당신은 한국인이 아닙니다. 2012 Special Adoption Law. The government shall endeavor to reduce the number of Korean children adopted abroad as part of its duties and responsibilities to protect children. 엄마, 오빠, 나 참 그리워. January 1954, my mom's birthday. Mommy, protect me. Daddy, protect me. You stand on shifting ground. You stand on shifting ground. You stand on shifting ground. June 25th, my birthday. Mommy, Korea. Daddy, America. The land fractures. The land fractures. The land fractures. The land in you. 1961, my father graduates from high school. Mommy, America. Daddy, Korea. 당신은 묘화하는 동에서 있습니다. 1976, my parents meet. 동기 부서 정수입니다. 1997, I enter junior high school. Pencil in your rights. Pencil in your rights. Pencil in your rights. Pencil in your name. I have 2 names. I do not have 2 names. Awe is a sound like a grimace. Open your mouth wide at both corners. is the over 10 adoptees in 1954. 우리는 한국인이 아닙니다. Ink in your rights, Sharpie in your rights, superglue your rights, chisel your name. Ya is for the sound in yong. Practice it over and over 10 times, over thousands of times. Your heart turns over before you say it. Yong, 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 yong. The unlucky number is 4. 7,295 children were adopted overseas in the 1960s, 48,247 in the 1970s, 65,321 in the 1980s. 두소치 이름이 있습니다. Ya is the over 65,000 adoptees. The annual average was 6,532. Every year they empty the town. Every year they fracture the class. Every year. The Korean government has designated the third wave of adoptions as a leap into professional adoption projects and child services. I am a professional adoption project. You can scrub me, don't worry. The government's phrasing will not harm me. 눈쪽이 뻑한tas입니다. I am not a diaspora. I am. You stereotype me, but Korean food is one of the only tenets I can authentically embody. I am an amateur Korean speaker. I rely on big corporations to speak my sentences. Aw is my sticking sound. When there are Koreans, I shut my mouth. I do not open its corners wide. I have no idea how it coheres. 저는 한국 여성입니다. This is a poem that I wrote about my birth mother, and then I have one more to kind of close out my reading. So this poem is called Maleficent. 1. In 7th grade, I learned to pray. In Spanish is rezar. Edged like razor, work and worship. I learned adoption was life's sword. Maldición, malediction. Bendición, benediction. Doubled and edged beatitude. I should give thanks, I learned. 2. She left her blood woven throughout, her curse, benison, her hope, imprecation. I learned in high school Latin courses, track, trajectory, swooping back, pendulum defixio, to fix her, defix her, to defix her, fix her. Gladius, sword of God, I raise my voice, recite this oration erasure, as taught to give praise. Gladiolus flower bowing, crimson in the pews, I learned. 3. Head bowed, do the work, the worship. Gladius Dei, Mater Dei, kneel before my Savior's, savor gratitude. I learned what words are twinned, alma, soul, Allah, wing. Why cracking open language never made for you, cleaves. Gladius meus, mater mea. Pray, mother, that you are not made bad, making bad, not the bad doer, doing bad works, that your progeny can narrate, orate, explain away the curse with which you leveled her. Swoop of sword, swoop of wing. Allah, Alma, Allah, Umma, I learned. 4. Magnificat anima mea Dominum, exultavit spiritus meus in Deo, salutari meo, quia respexit humilitatem anculae suae, beatem me dicent omnes. The swoop of these words, her same-sided wings, the rezar of my life, it cut. All right, I have one more from Adoptee Song, and then I'll read a more positive poem to end on. All right, so this poem is the final poem in the chap, and it's called Prayer to My Guardian Angel. In my childhood, bedroom, moon silvered, birds caught fire at dawn, light reflected in her face on the wall, her eyes closed, willfully, Madonna, Mama. She taught me to pray, what cannot be narrated, orated, explained away. I cried to her at night alone while my parents slept, told me always, you must have faith in this thing bigger than you, that God did the right thing, that I did the right thing. I ask for answers. She will not answer. She cannot answer. She does not know you. She prayed along with you every night that she did the right thing, that God did the right thing, that I do. Right. I'm going to read one poem that I think speaks to the Asian American experience from my forthcoming chapter, Anti-Asian Bias, to end on a lighter note. And it's called To the Guy Who Made Me a Pretzel at the Mall and Wouldn't Give Up Until I Told Him Where I'm really, really from. Thank you for your extreme interest in my personal life. Thank you for asking these questions with conviviality and not confederacy. Thank you for dogging me after my from Massachusetts wasn't good enough. Thank you for reminding me where I fit in, your vision of what America should or should not be. Thank you for clarifying what you meant via inappropriate language after I deliberately misunderstood you. Understood you a second time. Thank you for including a free dipping sauce in my order. Thank you for the solar panel smile you installed after I told you my ancestors come from Korea. Thank you for not asking North or South Korea. Thank you for greatly encouraging me to enjoy the rest of my day. Thank you for helping me become a kinder version of myself who can fold this poem like a grade school love note to my brothers, my sisters. All right, thank you so much.
Amazing, Maria. Thank you. A Bulgarian by birth, Katerina Stoikova is a bilingual poet and the author of Between a Birdcage and a Birdhouse, published by University Press of Kentucky in 2024. Katerina is the founder and senior editor of Accents Publishing and serves as the 2025-2026 president of the Kentucky State Poetry Society. Welcome, Katerina.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for this kind invitation, and thank you everyone for reading. Now I want to read you all my poems to be in conversation with yours, and I too curated my selections because I wanted to speak to the immigrant experience, and I'll just go ahead and read. Light without her body, the snake skin travels anywhere the wind wants. Having lost the glove of home, free to grow at last, the body moves on. You know how it goes, becoming someone else by leaving something behind. This is a very short poem, probably has like 15 words in it, but it is dedicated to everyone who has moved a lot. Stained glass butterflies, fourth set of windows this year. So this next poem is, I don't know, umpteenth attempt to describe a very specific situation. So I'm gonna read it and then I might talk about it. America, do you remember? 3 weeks upon landing, I sobbed in the basement of the English Language Multicultural Institute out of the most confused loneliness known to my being. A computer technician named Mitch found me, took me to the cafe, and bought me my first chocolate chip cookie. Everything got better from there. True story, tell you, someone find me crying and took me to buy me a chocolate chip cookie. Someone who I never saw before or since, but I never forgot the experience. Thus, this poem that may sound somewhat familiar to you. So much depends upon the kindness of others to make a foreign country yours, white chickens and all. Something that happened to me after I immigrated, and I don't know, at least in my case, I was 24 when I immigrated 30 years ago. I was wondering, should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? But what was happening is that your country discourages you from going back. So here is a poem that I wrote about it. The country who no longer wanted her children. Don't come back, she said. There is nothing here, she continued. You're better off there, she insisted. What would you do if you returned? She resisted. Remember why you left? She threatened. You will regret it, she knew. Either way, she didn't say. When you immigrate, you get to visit a lot. So this is a poem about that. I visit my homeland the way a snail tries to fit back into his old shell. Day after day, I writhe inside, counterclockwise. The shell is rough and narrow, opens sores on coddled parts, but I persist, eat tarator, cry over graves until I conform to my old contours. Finally, I am here. Snail is the most beautiful Bulgarian word, says my son, who is studying the language. I thought it meant love. And it's true, the two words are very close to one another, Ohlyuf and Lyubov. You hear that? This next poem has a little longer title. To the foreign woman who called her daughter Skatina for untying her shoes in the post office, Beaumont Branch, Lexington, Kentucky, April 18th, 2013. Actually, something happened. I witnessed it and I was so shocked by what I saw. I ran back into the car and I just wrote this poem. Somebody always listens. Somebody always understands, sees, feels what you say. I wouldn't want to be her, your little girl with pink sneakers, staring numbly into the floor. I wouldn't want to be you, a beacon of bile, arms crossed over the chest that helped you immigrate. Life appears to not be what he promised. The beauty you traded in for comfort half vanished, the comfort itself now taken for granted. Nor your meek American husband resigned to this upgrade to loneliness 1.1, your strange meals, barbed glances, loaded silences, submitted to living in fear of having a different opinion. Neither the elderly female relative, with her back to all of us, pretending to be engrossed in the merchandise of padded envelopes and comical postcards. The girl walks up to her and looks at cats with large eyes dancing groundhogs, thank you notes for the fact that nobody here speaks foreign languages. Little girl, before it gets better, I'm sorry to say it will get worse. If I could, I would tell her apomnitis, but she scares me too. For what is worth, one day she will want to erase what she just said and instead kneel down to help and continue to teach you, for she will know nothing matters more than her only daughter being able to walk well. Until then, it's okay to cry for the losses and accept the love. Любимая is what your mother should have said to you. I would tell her that I know. I know. I would tell her, I'm so sorry. I know. Content warning on this one, on domestic violence. 8th floor balcony gazelle. If I catch you smoking, I'll throw you off the balcony. If something happens to you, I'll jump off the balcony. Dad stopped hitting me. Go ahead, he laughed. Scream for help, then opened the door to the balcony. To free space in the kitchen, we moved the stove to the balcony. Dad got mad and started dragging Mom toward the balcony. You could see the sunrise out of the Black Sea from the balcony. When the guests for Mom's funeral arrived, Dad hid, smoking, on the balcony. I've been faking all my orgasms. I confessed to my first ex-husband on the balcony. I stared out for a month, waiting for my pen pal to arrive as I was scrubbing the windows on the balcony. Your marriage will last at most 3 years, Dad told me on the balcony. When I was leaving for America, I looked up from the cab and saw my best friend waving from the balcony. I'm ready to let go of everything that happened except the balcony. Katerina, there is no heaven or hell. There is just this balcony. This one is after a famous poem by Cesar Vallejo, Black Stone over White Stone. This is my rendition of it. I will die in Burgas. Burgas is my hometown. That's where I am right now. I arrived like about 6 hours ago. I will die in Burgas under the pouring rain that falls once a year or two whenever I can visit. I will die on the 8th floor balcony at sunrise as the sky tugs the sun's soul out of the Black Sea shimmer. It will be a Friday, as it is today, because as I write these lines, I notice how the work week ends and how I crawl into another pile unfinished business. Katerina died during her visit. Whoever is returning to Kentucky, isn't she, believe me, determined to remain unnoticed? This person mirrors her disappearing foreign bones completely. The only witnesses remain the balcony, the rain, the constant resurrections. And I'll finish with an older, more optimistic poem, right? Like everybody else. It is called The Apple Who Wanted to Become a Pine Cone, and it is written in the form of an interview. Question. I can see why a pine cone would wish to be an apple, but it is less obvious why an apple would want to be a pine cone. Why do it? Answer. Well, maybe I would like having hundreds of arms. Maybe I would enjoy letting air reach the rope of my core. Maybe I want to resemble a fish and a tree at the same time. Is that so difficult to believe? Question. Is there anything you would miss about being an apple? Answer. No, I am tired of being sweet, round, and shiny. I no longer want to smell good. I hate being food for humans. It bugs me when they look at me and salivate. I am tired of keeping their stupid doctor away, and I am afraid of worms. Question. How will you go about turning into a pine cone? Answer. First, I'll elongate, then I'll shrink at the waist, then I'll develop scales and produce a seed for each. I'll dry up and turn brown, my favorite color, and I will fall far, far from the tree.
Oh my gosh, thank you all so much for that reading. Your work is arresting and profound, such a range of emotion. I'm a little bit undone. Thank you so much. I would love to engage you in a little bit of conversation. Julia, I'd love to start with you if I might. I'd like to hear your thoughts on writing poetry with your extra lens as an immigrant, in so much as poetry as a form is especially rich with the compression of language and cultural connotation.
I think particularly being, an immigrant from a former Soviet country, I grew up hearing poems all the time. I mean, I started memorizing poems at age 2. And so when I came to the United States and started writing and speaking in English, I didn't I didn't know I was going to write poetry. But I think I started writing poems as a way to find my way in the language. And I think that's part of what poetry allows you to do, particularly, right, for immigrants, but for speakers of multiple languages, for people trying to make bridges, right, for people trying to hybridize or who can't help but hybridize and bridge. It is a vehicle for bridging temporalities, for bridging geographies, for bridging cultures and languages where we don't have to over explain. We can put things in proximity together and it becomes a metaphor and it becomes an echo and it becomes a resonance. And so I think for me, that's why poetry is so powerful.
Thank you. Maria, I wonder how you would answer that question. I love the way when you write your name, I love the way you write it in the Korean with the Korean alphabet.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like writing has been a way to integrate into community, to process, to kind of grow my sense of identity, but also to heal the self. And I feel like, especially at this time, like it's really great to take notice of different communities that are in peril or that are hurting. So in the Korean adoptee community a few years ago, someone was deported back to South Korea and had never been there, didn't speak the language, and ended up, unfortunately, committing suicide rather than going back to live there. There have been others who have sort of self-deported. Maybe they didn't have a good relationship with their adoptive families, or some people who agreed to leave because they were about to be deported. So they just, and so there's like now documentaries and things on people like adoptees who are kind of making a life there. And the government has gotten more the government has gotten less denial-y about the existence of Korean adoptees, so there's more support services than there have ever been. And I feel like a lot of that has been the effort of visibility, lobbying, adding to the canon of Korean and Korean adoptee literature and art and other work. And I feel like these communities have so much to teach writers about different ways of being, different ways of exploring oneself and the world, but also just like different things that are happening and that are affecting other people. So I feel really privileged to have to read a wide variety of writers from all different backgrounds. And I think that everybody should take the chance to read things that are new. And, I can understand having the things that speak to you, but I think that to be widely read is to be widely educated about what's going on and about different ways of craft and ways of working in one's poems.
Thank you, Maria. Violeta, are you with us? How would you answer that question?
I think, yeah, I was thinking sort of on Maria's note on deportations and the urgency of writing poetry. These days I've been thinking more than anything about the link between poetry and activism. These days I'm writing more fiction than poetry because I think it's a different kind of vehicle for conveying truth and rage and humor, right? It has other tools. It's a different container, right? But I thought, okay, but why did I start with poetry, right? Why does poetry have this urgency at the heart of it? And I think one of the things that you mentioned in this question, like the compression, right? I think the fact that poetry can tell a story in 3 lines, right? And you only need, I'm thinking slam poetry, right? 3 minutes to convey the plight of a country. You have 3 minutes to share otherness and what it means to be othered and despised and completely dispossessed. Because I think, poetry is also a great vehicle to convey human dispossession, right? Wars, unfortunately, like a lot of poetry is born out of catastrophe, and prose doesn't have that same compression, right? So the people I most admire, the poets I most admire that are standing up in these times of fascism, and global warfare and ecological destruction and genocide and adamant genocide, are poets that speak for their communities, right? I'm thinking specifically of Aidid Medina, Fresno Poet Laureate. She's been at the forefront of speaking of what the farm workers live in, Mexican and Central American farm workers live in Central California, and how their contributions have been invisibilized, marginalized, downplayed. And we know that the economy cannot continue without us, without them, without the manual laborers, right? So I think my great masters in poetry, the poets I learned from, not just in the books that I read, as a child, about, you know, the great American nature poets I love, like Merwin. Sure, like we all love those guys, right? But the poetry that for me really resonated at a political level was that of the poetry of the people, you know, slam poetry. I was really involved in the spoken word Cincinnati scene in the last 3 years, and it's all, you know, mostly the African American community, really through centuries of dispossession and slavery has developed a form, right? So many of us, the dispossessed of the earth, Mexican Americans, we developed the form. Chicanos, we developed oral forms of oral poetry that allow us to perform poetry in a really specific way, where we're trying to make it casual, but and maybe sometimes funny, maybe sometimes sad, but at the same time, it's poetry that's also the poetry of the struggle of being Mexican or of Mexican origin, or, you know, Latinos that are sometimes grouped together with, you know, other Hispanic communities. So I think, I think that in my personal experience, my poetry changed so much when I encountered the Mexican American and the Black communities. I never wrote the same again. Like all my books are pretty different amongst themselves. And sometimes they seem like they were written by a different person because there's different themes and styles. And that is born out of a cultural encounter with other forms of poetry that have been developed in the United States, that the greatest blessing is that it is a country of immigrants, regardless of the official discourse. That doesn't matter. We know that what makes, I want to say this even though I'm not there, you know, country rich, because it'll still is my adopted country no matter what. Its richness comes out of the diaspora, the world diaspora.
Thank you so much, Violeta. I'm sorry about that cough. Katerina, what are you thinking about this?
Well, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add that hasn't already been said. The most important thing to do as poets, in my opinion, whether we're immigrant poets or not, is to keep on adding our voices to the choir and our perspective, to those who would read and those who would listen, and know. And I think someone mentioned it earlier about our journey of wholeness, which is no less important, because as a publisher, I speak to writers who say the same thing, and they say, I want to publish this book to help people. And I say, if you are the only person who is helped by this book, that's enough. So I think that making sense of it all, of that duality and that bizarre experience about being here but being from someplace else and then going back and having the exact same experience and just hovering between worlds. And I think Julia read a poem about being cut in half, and I have a poem about being cut in half. And it's just serving as mirrors for one another. And Violeta spoke about how her poetry changed. I wrote in Bulgarian since I was 8 years old. I started writing poems in Bulgarian, and I wrote until I was 24 when I immigrated. And then what happened is I didn't write for 11 years at all. And all of a sudden, after that, I started writing, and I started writing in English. So I had this experience of two languages. And then those poems that I wrote in English, I translated in Bulgarian. And those people who knew me when I was 10 years old, 15 years old, 20-year-old poet, read them and said, oh, this is so you. These are your poems. So I think we may be an immigrant poets, but it is, we're poets first and foremost. And maybe we sound a little bit different and we have a different perspective, but everybody does that. Everybody has that. My 2 cents.
Thank you so much. I'd like to stay with you, Katerina, if I may, to talk about why reading contemporary immigrant voices is critically important right now. And I would like to know a few poets whose work we should be reading. And I would like to ask you this question first because I loved the anthology you edited, The Season of Delicate Hunger, a collection of contemporary Bulgarian poetry.
I think America is big. United States is a very big country. A lot of people write and publish, and it is very easy to look at just that, just us, right? People who write in the United States, but that will be incomplete picture, right? Right? We want to hear from the poets that are intersections of worlds that can give us, again, a different perspective that can translate experiences. The world is getting smaller and actually more homogeneous. The more we travel, the more English we see everywhere, and everybody's experience in many ways is more understandable from one country to another. But I don't know if I'm answering the question, why do we need to read immigrant poets? Is that the question? I mean, why wouldn't we? If we like to write, if we like to read poems, then it will be incomplete if we don't read our fellow immigrant poets. And who would we read? Yes, I did translate Bulgarian poets. I also try to translate a book a year of poetry. Just the one that just came out, I mean, days ago, is called Happiness Street by poet Olya Stoyanova, and she's one of the poets who was published in this anthology that you're referring to. So I would start with her, and then I translated last year selected poems by Marin Bodakov, who is a beloved Bulgarian poet, master of the short form. And to me, these are important people to read.
Thank you so much. Julia?
To name poets. This is always the most difficult question because I think there are so many. I mean, for me, I really always go back to Ilya Kaminsky, my kind of soul brother in poetry. And you know, if I'm being picky and picking Ukrainian poets, Olga Livshin, Louisa Muradian, Louisa Muradian's new book. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna pull it because it's so amazing. And if you don't have it, you should all have it. It's called I Make Jokes When I'm Devastated, and it's devastatingly funny. She and I have a book coming out together in 2027. Who else? I mean, I'm Suji Kwak Kim is a poet that I adore. You know, there's so many. I can't. I have too many to name. So those are a few.
Thank you, Julia. Maria?
Yeah, I think that one of the books that I continually go back to is Dictate by Teresa Hakkyangcha. Um, she has a Korean origin story, as many of us do. And so, even though she was not a Korean adoptee, she was dealing with the generational trauma of the Korean War and all the Japanese colonization and other issues. Dami Choi is also somebody who's written very wonderfully, cogently, amazingly on the subject, and has translated works by Korean poets. I find today there's a lot of cross-pollination between people in the Korean diaspora. People like Bohee Moon, who has a new book coming out by Milkweed. I just got the info on called Birthstones in the Province of Mercy, which I have pre-ordered. And there are so many amazing adoptee poets, like Lee Herrick. You know, uh, there's so many, Marcia Calabretta, Canciobello, just people who are doing amazing work. It's often easy to forget that transnational adoptees are immigrants. But certainly, as I said before, I read a wide variety of immigrant and also international poets. I also really like to read poets whose families were immigrants or who are touching on their sort of American lineages and where that intertwines with other countries. I think there's so much to be learned craft-wise, language-wise, even just cultural-wise from engaging with works by others, and seeing how they do things. One of my favorite poets is Craig Santos Perez, who is from what we call Guam, the territory of Guam. So, even though he is, ostensibly from the US, right? I think that, the identity that he brings and the lens of his poems are something that really inspire me. Diana Coy Wynn is another one. Her parents came from Vietnam, after the Vietnam War. And so she herself is not an immigrant, but like the way that she writes about the generational trauma that she inherited, especially in her second book, Root Fractures, is really inspiring to me. Yes.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you very much for the generosity of your thoughtful readings and your responses and your contributions to contemporary literature. Thank you, Violeta, who we lost her for a bad connection. And we really appreciate having you all here. Thanks so much to Ash as well.
Thank you, Karen, for bringing us together and putting this on and just continuously curating poet voices and poetry and community in person and, virtually.
Oh, thank you,
Yes.
Julia. I hope, I wish, as I said, I wish we were all sitting around the table with some cake. I do hope to see you all in person soon.
Thank you so much.
Take good care. Get some rest, Katerina.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you all. It's been an honor to be in your company. And thank you, Karen, for bringing us all together.
Thank you, Mariah. Take good care.